All right, here we go. Okay, all. Well, welcome. Today, we're going to talk about how to get more meetings with ideal decision makers. And this is really designed for service-based professionals. It's really for people who are fractional executives, consultants, and trusted advisors of all flavors. And so I want to make sure that as we get started today, I want to make sure that you're in the right place. So who this master class is for fractional executives or consultants or trusted advisors who are just starting out and want to hit the ground running, landing more meetings with founders, with business owners, with the visionaries who have the authority to actually write the checks and sign your engagement letters. And it's also for established service business owners who want to up your game and have greater frequency and quality of discovery calls and presentation meetings with your ideal decision makers. And it's for those established people who want to stop wasting time networking with the wrong people or meeting a lot of decoy decision makers. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those are later on. And it's also for professionals who want to attract and build authentic, rewarding relationships, human relationships, but at the same time, get more qualified discovery calls and win more business. So that's who this is for. It's also for trusted advisors. If you have a business that's anything to do with a trusted advisory service and you want to hit and miss networking and grow a really superior connection base filled with the leaders who can take your business to completely new levels and become the chosen resource in your field, that's who this is for. So does any of that sound like you? I'd like to be able to turn the frown on this guy's face into a smile. And that's what I'm really looking to do today. And it's for guys, for gals. Let's turn that frown into a smile. So here's what you're going to be learning today. You're going to be getting a decision maker blueprint, where to find your ideal decision makers and how to attract them, how to gain access to them. And we're going to be uncovering hidden channels to find where those decision makers are hanging out and how to use AI to turbocharge your appeal with them. So we tend to think of AI as very automated and very robot-like. Well, I'm going to flip the script with you on that today, big time. And you're also going to have a complete methodology for a mindset transformation. If you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, and I've been shocked at how many people actually experience imposter syndrome. I thought it was sort of sporadic, but it's actually quite common. If you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, you're going to gain a mindset shift away from that being a vendor to becoming a peer to these decision makers. And you're going to be building your confidence, and you're going to be learning about what value first framing is all about. You're also going to be gaining a methodology for trust building and opportunity generation using psychology, emotional intelligence, and AI so that you can eliminate the need for a salesy, pushy, or turn-off tactics. And I'm going to be sharing something brand new with you called Neuro-Networking, the Neuro-Networking system, which enables you to find and attract and engage, really build rapport and get more meetings with ideal decision makers so that you have an authentic relationship building methodology that makes your prospects ask for you. Not like you're not going to convince them, they're going to be asking for you to work with them. That's what you're going to be learning today. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why you should even be listening to me on this subject at all. I am a targeted networking specialist and productization specialist, and I'm the author of 2 books, one on networking, Network Like a Fox, and also another one on direct access. And I'm working on a 3rd one now that's going to be a real game changer. And I have a lot of experience and a proven track record in helping service-based professionals launch, grow, and scale very successful service businesses. I'm a national speaker on business networking. I've spoken at national conferences and industry events, business conferences, and all over the country, and in fact, all over the world. And I've taught this program that you're going to be getting today to dozens of business associations, professional service firms, fractional communities, and even within top peer organizations such as the Entrepreneurs Organization. So that's a little bit about me and why you should even be listening to me on this topic. And just to share with you a couple of my fans, real fractional executives who have gone through my programs and really know and experience what I've shared with them and how it's transformed their businesses. Now, I know that most people think that they're pretty good at networking. And yeah, I mean, I think people are pretty active at networking, and we know that networking is such an important part of building a business, any business really, and even building a career. But if I asked you to reach out to your network and get several meetings booked with actual check writing, engagement, agreement signings, decision makers, would it be easy or a struggle? Would it be a snap or a real challenge? And if I asked you to reach out to your network and ask for referrals from these very same decision makers, would it feel easy or would it feel challenging? Would it be a snap or would it be a struggle? So today is going to take some mental, strategic, and tactical shifts because we're going to be going from quantity to quality and from reactive to proactive, from very, very general to very, very specific. Now, I know, because I know a number of you, some of you have already made some really good strides in these directions, but today you're going to be sharpening your saw. You're going to be taking what's already good into really outstanding, because we're going to be going from hit and miss to highly intentional. And this is especially important. We're going to be going from an external focus to an internal psychology focus. And that's not generally spoken about when we talk about building the right networks, building the right circles of influence. So your ideal networking nexus is comprised generally of your connectors, right? People who know you and will connect you with other people. Your circle of influence, that special inner group, that inner group of maybe somewhere between 6 to 10 people that are really your people, that watch out for you, that are really helping you in your business, that really care specifically about you and are focused on helping you gain more referrals, and you them. That's your circle of influence. That's your very special cohort of people. And then there are the decision makers, the people that actually hire you. And that's who we're going to be focusing on today. Today, we're going to be looking mostly at the decision makers, but with all these three categories of colleagues intersect, that's where your networking nexus resides. So the first step that we're going to be looking at today is we always want to start with who. Now, I just got an email this morning, someone who had responded to, I had been notified about a search for a particular kind of fractional executive, put the word out, and about 20 fractional executives reached out to me and said, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I did refer the first 20 to the business owner. Certainly the business owner didn't speak to 20 of those people, but 20 people responded. And I got an email this morning about that search. And when I asked that person how they were actually building their business and where they were networking, he told me that he had about 4 different specializations in about 5 different networks and 5 different sectors of business that he looks at. And it was extremely so spread out that it was very hard to really think about how I would actually refer this person. So what I say to you, really, we're moving from general to specific. I mean it very, very, very candidly. We're always going to start with who, because specificity speeds up success. What I mean by that is I want you to be thinking about what your primary vertical that you service is. What's your niche? I know you may have several categories of verticals that you deal with, but there really should be one primary area. And it's really important to become specific. And how that's going to tie back to meeting your ideal decision makers, you're going to see that very soon. Today, we're going to be talking about the very specific migraine headaches that your actual specific niche is really dealing with. The more clear and the more specific you can get about what their migraine headaches are, what their migraine business headaches are, the better it's going to be for you. What are the circumstances, the trigger events that this niche market is dealing with that actually prompt them from seeking someone like you out? What are the demographics of your target audience? And what are their cultures and missions like that drive them? All of these things, knowing the specificity of all of them will speed up your success, and it's going to help us into really helping you gain access to your ideal decision makers. And when we're talking about the who, we want to be looking at who are the real decision makers? What are their exact roles? What are their event triggers? So just to give you a few examples, a trigger event for a staffing, first of all, if you're going to be if your particular niche market is staffing companies, and I've had lawyers and accountants and fractional executives focusing on staffing companies as their niche market. If you're focusing on staffing companies, the exact decision maker role would very likely be the CEO or president of that company. And a trigger event might be they lost a major client. That might be some reason that they would reach out, or perhaps a particular industry that they work with is losing major traction and they have to pivot. A marketing agency would probably be the managing director. And if they lost a major client, that could really actually create havoc for them. And now they've got to deal with that issue. A franchisor. Now, when it comes to the franchising world, most people they conflate a franchisee and a franchisor, and they're very, very different. If you are the owner of franchises and not being a franchisee, if you own the franchise yourself and you're looking for new franchisees, that's going to create a very different mindset for you and a different set of purposes for you as you're looking to meet service providers. So as you are a fractional executive or a consultant and you want to work with franchising in the franchising sector, you want to be meeting franchisors, not the franchisees, because the franchisors are the decision makers. If you're working with private equity firms, you're looking to meet operating partners or the managing directors of a private equity firm. They will be the decision maker in bringing on particular service providers. And different triggers for them might be they just made an acquisition, or they're working on an integration, or they're looking for new acquisitions. It all depends. So with private equity firms, and they're one of the most difficult people to actually gain access to decision makers you're going to be looking at meeting the managing director or an operating partner, because they're usually dealing with the external world. If you're working with a law firm, you're going to be working with the managing partner. That is the real decision maker, managing partners or managing partners of different practice groups. And if they're opening a new location, that might be a trigger for them. Or if they're looking to create a new practice segment, that might be a trigger for them. Or if you're dealing with manufacturing companies, you'd be dealing with the president or CEO. And a trigger for them might be launching a new product. All of this matters greatly when we're setting a strategy for how to meet ideal decision makers. So have you ever found yourself thinking that you're meeting with the decision maker, but it's really a decoy? I've had that happen to me until I got really savvy and really wise about this. I definitely was meeting a lot of decoys, and they can look pretty real, and they can be very, very they can be very convincing, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be the ones to hire you. The decoy can become a real big time-wasting gatekeeper. It can be a real problem. So learning how to discern between the decoy and the real decision maker is a skill set and an art form that I want you to gain. So in this is a picture of it's a perfect example. The person that's standing up is a man, and he's in that power pose, and he looks like he's the decision maker. But guess what? The real decision maker in this group is the woman seating. She's second from to the right of him. She's the real decision maker. And it can be very, very misleading unless you learn how to gain real knowledge about how to find the real decision maker. How do we discover them? So the first thing is, and this is super important, never assume. I can't tell you how many meetings I have been in and how many meetings my clients have been in where they've assumed that they're working with the real decision maker. And over time, I've learned the first rule of thumb is never assume that you're talking to the decision maker. You have to really gain clarity. And how you gain clarity is to ask better discovery questions. I'll be sharing a little bit more about what those questions are in a moment. But you need to know that you have to really get better at discovery questions. And you want to start developing the right strategies for how to get past these gatekeepers. Now, today, we're very fortunate because we have LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is one of the most valuable ways to get past gatekeepers because almost everybody will put a profile up on LinkedIn, including CEOs. And that's a really good thing. Now, they may not be actively on LinkedIn all the time, but nevertheless, it's still a valuable tool to getting past the gatekeeper. You also want to make sure that you're targeting the real decision maker, and you also want to confirm their level of influence. Because if you're not working with the actual decision maker, sometimes you can be working with someone who has a lot of influence, and that can make a very big difference because some of these influencers can be gate openers and not gate closers. Although, if you're dealing with some people who have high level roles, such as people in HR, they could be the senior VP of HR. Very often, those kinds of folks can be gate closers, not gate openers, for a lot of reasons. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But in other cases, some of these influencers can be gate openers and are willing advocates for you. And learning how to discern the difference is part of this wonderful process that I'm going to be teaching you today. So how do we uncover the real truth about the real decision maker? So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples. There are many, many more, but I'm not going to overwhelm you with the actual specifics, but I do want you to have at least two. So here are some very, very specific questions to ask. So you're in a meeting with a person that you think might be the decision maker, but maybe not. So just so I'm respecting everyone's time, when a decision like this gets made, who else in your company typically weighs in or needs to sign off? Now, as you can see, it's a very gentle question, but very specific. And why it works is it assumes inclusion, not exclusion. It frames an escalation as standard operating procedure, and it's not challenging their status or their position. It's inviting them to be in the process of helping you and not challenging their expertise or their level. And it's very important. And I'm going to share with you a little bit why. And this goes back to the psychology piece of it all. A second way that you can ask the question is, if we both felt that working together would be a fit, would anything or anyone else need to be involved before you could greenlight it? So in this way, you're inviting them to be a decision maker of sorts. It's conditional and collaborative, but it subtly tests the autonomy without accusing them of being just a gatekeeper. There is a psychology to the decoy gatekeeper, and it takes it's a big conversation, but there are many, many reasons for why a gatekeeper wants to have you think that they're the decision maker. And it often is grounded in some form of ego or lack of confidence or both. And there's a lot that goes into this. And as we get further into today's conversation, I'm going to share with you how we get into uncover the psychology of it. And just to give you an example of how finding the right decision makers can help you really boost your business. And once you get through the phases of really just general networking, here's an example of somebody that really gained the benefit of having access to the real decision makers through the kind of work that I do. And I just want to introduce you to Beth Rusert, who's a relatively new EOS implementer, and she was grappling with not being able, she was networking up a storm, meeting a lot of great people, but wasn't meeting the actual decision makers that would lead her to having the EOS 90-minute meetings. And just through the kinds of conversations that I guided her through and being able to actually introduce her to the right kinds of decision makers, she started to gain access to those kinds of specific decision maker meetings. It flipped the script for her. And she's just one example. So that leads me to step 2 in our process today of gaining access to ideal decision makers and gaining more meetings with them. Now we have to figure out where are they actually to be found. We know the who now, but where are they hanging out and how do we gain access to them? And in this part of the conversation, I want to share with you that a little research pays off big time. Now, we're very, very fortunate. In the decades gone by, we'd be spending weeks and weeks and weeks trying to figure out how to research where our decision makers are congregating. But today, we have Google, we have LinkedIn, we have conferences. Just the websites of conferences are filled with amazing information. We have trade publications. We can find people through the trade publications. And we have podcasts. All of these are places to research where we can find our actual decision makers. Now, to be sure, decision makers are not networking up a storm everywhere and anywhere. They are very, very choosy. Professionally, our actual decision makers are attending high-level conferences and organizational association meetings. They're going where other high-level leaders are congregating. They're involved in high-level peer organizations and events and communities such as Vistage, YPO, Entrepreneurs Organization. These are organizations where they are congregating with their peers at the same level. So that's a very important piece of the equation. And they're also serving on boards or committees, boards of directors and committees. So that's where they're congregating. Personally, they're engaged in activities that are rather high level, country clubs, golf, boating, tennis, high level activities. They're also coaching school teams. They're involved in alumni associations. And that's a very important center of influence. Alumni associations I'll give you an example. A client of mine was starting a new SaaS organization. He had already launched one very, very successful SaaS product and was starting his second. And he was an alumni of IBM. Now, that's not a university, but it still has an alumni association. IBM grads, they keep in touch. He went on the LinkedIn Alumni Association group for IBM and started sharing about his new project. And within 2 weeks, he had his first $1 million investor through his IBM association. It's amazing. And it really does work. If you're in with the right group of people, with the right decision makers, magic happens, right? And also decision makers are going on top tier vacation destinations. And that's where they're hanging out. They are very selective. Decision makers are picky. They may not be attending general networking events or general groups. And that's why when my clients ask me, where should I be networking? And they're usually being recommended to join general networking groups. And I can share about the specifics about that, but it's not like I'm trying to be snobby about which groups to join, whether it be provisors or BNI or chambers of commerce or things like that. But if your decision makers are not going to those networking events, I'm not going to recommend that you join them. But they are speaking at conferences and they are speaking at networking events, and they're speaking on podcasts. And this is a huge advantage for us because we can find them at these conferences, or we can find them and connect with them through these networking events at which they're the speakers or panelists or on those podcasts. In essence, you want to be swimming where your ideal fish are swimming. And if the fish that you are meeting are too small, you're probably swimming in the wrong pond. Now, I'm going to check in the chat right now. How many of you are have found yourself swimming in the wrong pond? If you found yourself swimming in the wrong pond, thank you. I have definitely, and how this all began for me is I realized that I was swimming in the wrong pond. And I fixed that, and that's what I want to help you fix it too. Okay, I'm glad that you're with me on that, because that is where we can really start shifting the strategy and the conversation. Now, let me give you a case in point. This really happened. A few years ago, I used to host a wonderful event where I brought partners. Now remember, these were only partners in law firms and accounting firms together. They tend to cross-refer to each other. And we had a monthly event, and it was a live event. And one of the attorneys, partners, was a partner in a law firm, and he had an intellectual property practice. And I asked him how it was going, and he said, I'm meeting great people. However, very frankly, very few of the other partners here, whether they be in accounting firms or law firms, have the kinds of relationships that I need to be meeting. And I said, really, how so? I said, who are your clients? And he said, I specialize in helping medical device companies gain the intellectual property patents and trade agreements for their products. And he said, I'm not meeting the people that I need to be meeting. I said, well, who do you need to meet? He said, I need to be meeting the owners and the CEOs and the presidents of medical device companies. So we went to work on where he should be going. He was a burnt out networker with a low pipeline, and I helped him go to a flowing pipeline of medical device company relationships and decision makers. And how he did that was I helped him find the right associations and events to go to. And he started the very first event that he went to. He met 6 actual decision makers of medical device companies and opened the door to a whole new pipeline of opportunity. So let me show you exactly how it works. I'm going to take you behind the scenes. I don't care if you use Google or ChatGPT, Deep Search, or Perplexity. They're all good. We can find, if we do the right searching, if my friend wanted to find conferences of medical device manufacturers, we did a search, and it's a pretty simple search. And the very first one that came up, and by the way, he's based in New York. So we did a search of events in New York, and this is, just one of them. And if we did a search on ChatGPT Deep Search or Perplexity, the same ones come up. But in Perplexity, we got an entire search. Perplexity which is an AI tool, one of the AI LLMs. It does an amazing job of uncovering specific and very deeply researched examples of what you need. So you're going to get many examples, and it's going to give you all the reasons why those examples are a fit for your search. Now, when I went online and I actually found one event, and I want to show you how it works. So here's the MedTech Redefines event, and it's in San Diego, and it's happening in October. And if we look under attendees, it's actually going to show us the percentage of different types of people that are going to be showing up. So as you can see, 30% of the attendees that happened in the years past were chairmen and founders and presidents. So we know that they already have a track record of having the right people attending. And you can start to get a breakdown. But if I start to dig a little deeper and I look at the actual board of directors of who's working on this event, I can find the actual people. I can find the program director. And you start meeting the program director is going to enable you to gain more information about who the speakers are, who the panelists are, who's running the roundtable discussions, who the sponsors are, and who's going to actually be showing up. And he or she can actually introduce you to people if they think that you're going to be attending. These conference sites are huge pockets of opportunity for us. And so we can actually do research way before we ever go and gain access to the right decision makers. It's all in the preparation. And finally, another opportunity is for you to invite your ideal decision makers to your own events and groups. And this has been a hugely successful strategy that I've used over the years. I began to realize, and I learned this from one of my clients who created monthly roundtables. He was his niche market was staffing companies and also restaurants. And he would create roundtable events for the owners of those companies. I borrowed his idea, and I started to create my own events and my own groups and my own roundtables, and started to gain access to my decision makers directly on a monthly basis. And you can too. And that brings me to step number 3. And this is super, super important, because your mindset, if you don't master your mindset in gaining access to your decision makers, it's going to be a big obstacle and a roadblock for you. because the major pitfalls that most people encounter or deal with is they find themselves networking laterally or down because it's easy or cheaper. That's really even more common. When I talk to people about how they select the networking groups that they belong to, they don't want to spend money on meeting the right people. When in fact, if they would spend more upfront, but they would actually the return on investment would be higher. So I always recommend networking up. If you don't learn to overcome your imposter syndrome, you're going to see yourself as trying to get business from these people as a vendor versus one of them, versus seeing yourself as a peer. And your ideal decision makers are going to experience that and feel it from you. So you have to really transform yourself. And you really need to start focusing on, if you're focused on telling or sneaky selling, and then you're not asking, it's a pitfall for you. They're going to feel that. And that's why people, they tend to rush and they tend to focus on telling how great they are and all about what they know and why they need your services. You're not asking enough questions. And that's coming from your own mindset. You're focused on how you look instead of really understanding your decision maker, really getting inside their psyche. And that's a big pitfall. Now, I have to say that the number one request I get from people when it comes to networking is they are looking for referral sources. It's the most common thing everybody wants them. I want to find referrals. I want to find referral sources. I want to find referral partners. That's the number one thing people ask me for. But I want to share with you, there's nothing wrong with finding referrals. Everybody loves them. But I want to go underneath the surface a little bit and tell you the real reasons that you want them. You want someone to bring opportunity to your doorstep instead of you going out there and gathering it yourself or generating it yourself. You want someone to vouch for you so you don't have to prove yourself. You feel it's much easier when someone else vouches for you so you don't actually have to demonstrate that directly. You want someone to enable you not to have to sell and market yourself. It's so much nicer when the opportunity comes to your doorstep, right? I get it. And what's wrong with any of that? Nothing. Nothing is wrong. The problem is that when you depend 100% on referrals, guess where the power lies? It's not lying within you. It's lying outside of yourself. And so as long as the referrals tend to come in, all is well. But when they start to wane, when they dry up, or when they're the wrong referrals, you're sunk and you have nothing to be, there's no backup. And that's why gaining direct access to your decision makers, your ideal decision makers, is really super important. And this is why preparation is going to feed your confidence. So what if you could have a complete dossier on your ideal decision maker? What if you could learn about what his or her personality is like, what his or her psychology is, what his Myers-Briggs type is like, or his DISC type is like, and what would resonate with him or her, and what would repel him or her, what would build attraction and affinity, not infinity, affinity. What if you had all of this information before you reached out, before you got on that Zoom call? How would that be? Wouldn't that be amazing? And what if you had a crystal ball into the psyche of every key decision maker that you wanted to engage in a conversation? And you know what? That's what's available to us today in ways we've never had before. And I'll share about that with you in much greater detail very, very shortly. But that brings me to step number 4, which is building trust. Trust, what I call the trust acceleration system. Rushing what you want to get to is the biggest pitfall professionals make when trying to gain meetings with ideal decision makers. When you start to rush and get what you want from a meeting and make it happen too soon, you lose, you delay. The second mistake is pitching and convincing too soon. Well, first of all, pitching too soon is a big problem, but also convincing in and of itself is a problem. If you have to convince people, that is not sales, that is pushing. That's why salespeople get the reputation of being pushy, because they're trying to convince. And by the way, I know that one personally, because before I ever had my own business, I was the ultimate convincer, and it never, ever worked. And the third pitfall is not speaking in a style that resonates with your prospect. If you're speaking in a way that turns them off or doesn't build affinity with them, you lose them very, very quickly. And so that's why it's so important that we really understand who we're speaking with and what works with them and what doesn't work with them. And that's going to accelerate your trust quotient. And how we do that is the better the questions that we ask, the more that we engage people, the more that we're able to ask probing questions that are insightful, that really make people think, the more that we draw people toward us instead of away from us. And the better we are at listening for understanding and for cues, not just to listen because we know we're supposed to, but really caring about what they're saying, really listening between the lines so we understand them and gain a real intuitiveness about them, a real emotional intelligence about them. That's the kind of listening that we really need to be developing. And if we can learn to ask if we've been understood, if we understand correctly, instead of assuming that we understand correctly. And if we're human, we up our empathy. So many times today, everybody's banding the word empathy around, but I don't think people really know what it means, what it feels like to be experienced in an empathic way. And if we could just up level our patience and still be clear with people, it would bring us so much further, so much faster. And that's why I want to say that we need to be practicing before we ever meet with people, especially when they're super important meetings. Now, I've worked with many teams and of professionals before. I can't tell you that 90% of the time people are not preparing for their meetings with very important people. Or if they are, they're preparing with convincing, not with real how they're going to be dealing with what won't work instead of what they want to have happen. And that's really critical. And then they don't debrief with other people that are objective after these meetings. So they make an assumption about about why something didn't work when they really don't know, and they don't debrief with other people. They're living in their own bubble, basically. So I want to give you a few ideas about what's really going to be engaging most decision makers, no matter what their style is. And of course, the more we understand about their psyche, the better we can do that. But these are general suggestions. This has worked incredibly well. The would you like or would you like me to is an invitation. And it's an invitation that's also going to force people to give you a specific yes or a no. So if I say, would you like to set up a follow-up meeting? And they don't say yes, it's a no. Would you like to have me send you a link to something? Would you like to attend something? They'll say yes, or they'll say no. Would you like is a magic question, and it takes a lot of the pressure off of people because they're allowed to say no. And I've given them an invitation, but I'm also requiring them to be clear. Perhaps you'd like to, or perhaps you'd want to. The perhaps is the key word here. This is where we're actually giving people a way, it's a statement, but it's also giving them an out. And perhaps doesn't feel like a push. It feels like an invitation. To make sure that I'm clear, did I get that right? In other words, you're not being whooshy about it or wussy about it. You're actually saying, I want to be clear. Did I get this right? You're not actually using the formulaic mirroring. You're saying, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Did I get this correctly? That's a really great way to make sure that you've understood, because if you haven't gotten it accurately, people are going to say, well, that's sort of right, but here's what's missing. And it's a great way of gaining much better clarity. Extending an invitation is always people that say no, but invitation doesn't feel like a push. Or the word, consider this, consider looking at something this way. Consider that we have found this works or that doesn't work. When you ask people to consider, you're asking them to think about it in a particular way, but you're not pushing them and you're not convincing them. Here's what we found. A lot of people use this, and sometimes it does work, but be careful on this one. Be careful on this one because it can sound like a convincing. But here's what we found, and you might find this too, or you may not. So you want to make sure that when you're engaging decision makers, you're clear, you're directional, but you're not forcing. And that's the trick, how to engage people and make sure that you're leading them without having them feel pushed. And what will turn them off is when you say, this is how many years of experience you have, or trying to convince them. Nobody cares about how many years of experience you have. Nobody cares. All they care about is what you have for them. How can you help them? What's in it for me? They can't help it. It's human nature. They're not selfish people. They don't want to waste their time. They just want to know, can you help me? Can you bring value to me? How can you bring value to me? And if you try to convince them, you're going to turn them off. So what do most decision makers want? To learn as quickly as possible without wasting any time if you have what they want or need for their business. They don't want to be pitched until they're good and ready. And you know what they really want? They really want to sell themselves on you. They want to actually find a way to sell themselves without you selling them. And when you can have people come to that place, then you have really been extremely effective in not just gaining access to the right decision makers, but gaining affinity with them. Because when it comes to meeting and getting meetings with ideal decision makers, nothing is more important than building affinity and trust. And to do that, you have to know yourself before you try to know them. Now, I know a lot of you think that you know yourselves, but you don't really know how you occur for other people unless you've asked them. Now, I used to do a really fun exercise with clients. I would give them the 5 questions, and those questions were questions that they were required to ask of other people, a whole selection of people in their world. It could be family, it could be friends, and it could be decision makers, and it could be clients, and it could be prospects. And when they asked those questions, they were questions designed to give them actually objective feedback about them. People hated that exercise, but when they did it, they found out how much they didn't know about how people saw them. It was an amazing exercise. And sometimes I still do it. It's really fun. And periodically, it's a good one for you to do yourself. It's really important for you to know yourself as others see you before you try to know other people. And then to do everything that you can to put others first in the conversation, to leave your fear, your desperation, your worry, and your ego at the door. And that leads me to step number 5, which is the secret sauce. And the secret sauce today, which I'm pretty excited about, because this is going to be talking about how AI can turn us into masters of relationship building with ideal decision makers. Rather than seeing AI as this productivity tool and a time saver, AI can really be the kind of it's revolutionary in what we can learn through AI. It can turn us into being way more human than even before we had it. And I know that sounds crazy, but it is true. And I'm going to show you exactly how. Now, the formula that I've shown you today is you've gotten to see the who, who we want to actually meet, who the right decision makers are, where we can find them, how to gain access to them and build affinity with them through our own really transformation of our own mindset, how we can build trust and affinity with them in a very concentrated and very intentional way. And then finally, the magic piece is the AI piece. And this is really what I want to share with you next, because I want to have you say hello to what I call neuro-networking. Now, neuro-networking is a formula that I use with my clients, and I help my clients use with their clients. It's a blend of marrying psychology, you understanding the psychology of your direct decision makers, understanding using emotional intelligence in building those relationships, and now adding AI into the entire equation so that we can get more meetings and build stronger affinity with just the right people, so that we can have more ideal clients work with us in our business. So I want you to meet, this is a very, very, it's a very different kind of GPT. It's a private GPT. You cannot find this. You can't get access to it unless you have, you get access to it through me. It was built on ChatGPT. and it's called the Inner Circle Affinity Builder. And what this GPT does is it prepares you with structured, research-backed insights for authentic client and networking meetings, for decision maker meetings. So this is the preparation opportunity builder before. Remember I said, what would it be like for you if you could gain affinity before you ever went into any one of those networking meetings? This is a tool that we can use to gain much deeper insights to people before we ever meet with them. Now, these are just a few of the prompts that that show up on the initial screen, but there are many, many more prompts that I use with my clients and show them how to use in building deeper relationships and deeper affinity with exactly the right decision makers. Now, if you wanted to gain access to this executive, there's an entire dossier that you're going to be getting after you use the Inner Circle Affinity Builder. And this report comes out to you and with a complete understanding of who they are, what their psychology is, what their personality is, what communication style they operate with, what turns them on, what turns them off, and how to build trust with them much more quickly. Now, yes, you can go to ChatGPT and do this, but you have to know exactly how to dig under the hood for this. And that's the neuro-networking piece of it. And unless you really understand what psychology to use and what emotional intelligence to use and how to use the AI tools, you're just going to be getting the surface of what you want to have and what can really give you the real clues to gaining much better initial meetings with people and getting the initial meeting to turn into additional meetings and then ultimately into a conversion with the right clients. So neuro-networking is a process. It's a formula. Now, what I've shared with you today are the 5 essential steps to elevate the number and the quality of the decision makers that you meet, to how to gain more meetings with them and how to land more business with them, and how to do this with authenticity and true relationship building skill, not just, some tactics. This is really digging under the hood a lot more deeply, and to incorporate major advantages through strategy and technology to really advance your ability to build trust and affinity with people much quicker. Yes, we need to be human. Yes, we have some really great strategies, but AI can really take us to a whole new level. That even though I've been using my own education, my own psychological training and my own training in being certified in many different assessment tools, still in a way, the tools that we have with AI today can take us to a whole other level. And I've been absolutely blown away by that. So what's next? So today I've given you a number of different strategies and a number of different ways to gain access to the ideal decision makers. Believe me, there's so much more I could be covering, but in an hour, there's only so much I can give you. But so today I'd like to ask you, what have you gained today? What have you realized today that has held you back from meeting more decision makers? And what steps will you take in the next 3 days to boost your access to these decision makers and gaining trust and affinity with them? So what are a couple of the takeaways? Steve says, usually I can often climb out to the bigger pond. That's good, Steve. So then you would say that you're gaining access to the right decision makers more frequently. So what are some of the things that where are the gaps for you? Seeing ourselves as their peer and not a vendor. That is a huge one. That is a really, really big one, Diane. And Karen is saying you've definitely been swimming in the wrong pond. Well, now you have some tools for finding how to get into the right ponds. Right. And the research, by the way, in the Affinity Builder, the research goes even deeper than I was even able to show you today. It is, I've been training this GPT for months now, and every single time it gets better and better and better. Every month it gets stronger and stronger. But again, without the right prompts and without the right questions and without pushing AI to go deeper and to be more effective, it can't do what we need it to do. But we do it the right way, we're going to get so much more training and so much more proficiency. So Nancy says, I go into sales mode too quickly. You've been rushing, right? And sales, see, that's right. Okay, so Nancy, I want to just say, yes, they are busy, but I want to say one thing. Go back to what I said about the questions. When you ask the kinds of questions of CEOs that make them stop in their tracks, all of a sudden you don't seem like a bother to them or a time waster. Now you are actually a thought provoker, thought provoker, you've been giving them some things to think about that they've never thought about before. And that's really where the missing link is for you, or for all of us, really. How do we get them to stop scrolling, stop looking at their phone and pay attention to us when we make them ask, when we give them a question that they have never thought about before, that's really, it's blowing them away. And that's so powerful. Those are just, and Diane, those are just a couple of the questions. I mean, there are so many more to share with you. Okay, so now what blind spots do you need to work on? I want you to share now what's missing for you. And some of you have actually worked with me before in my Scale Up to Success program. That's my 4-month private coaching program where you work on everything in taking your business, whether you are in launch mode, grow up mode, or scale up mode. This is really an entire playbook for taking your service business to a completely different level of success, gaining access to the right decision makers and closing more business with them. But also, now I'm going to be infusing that Scale Up to Success program with the whole neuro-networking method. And what's going to be included in that is a custom WISE networking plan, the WISE Circles of Influence roadmap, and the WISE Inner Circle Affinity Builder. So I'm just going to invite you to think about this. Isn't it a time to break through in your business? If you've been feeling like maybe you're missing something, then I'm going to invite you to book a discovery call with me after today is over. And this is really, it's really quite unlike other discovery calls where we're going to be going way deeper and uncover where you've been underserving yourselves and your clients. And we're going to take a very in-depth look at where your business weak spots are, your positioning or your network, or maybe even your circle of influence. Maybe they're the wrong people in there. Maybe you think it's, they're good people and they may be very nice people, but maybe they don't have the right skills or the right influence or the right relationships or the right access to decision makers. Maybe you don't have any decision makers in there at all. And maybe that's really where the gap is. So if you are interested in upping your game, I want you to think about how you can up your game in your network and meet more decision makers and do this without depending solely on referrals. That's really where there's been a huge emphasis on for too many people. And this is where you get to put the power of gaining visibility and credibility and respect and authority back in having it back in your court. Now, just to give you a little snapshot, a little sneak preview that, these are the 2 new pieces I'm going to be adding into my Scale Up to Success program. But this is a little example of what the Circle of Influence roadmap looks like. And this is with the networking map. And everybody's is going to be customized. So if that's something that's of interest to you, let me just give you a little chance to take some notes. I'm going to be sending this to you after today's class is over, of course. But just take a little note about that link. Let me just uncover that so you can see it. And now it's time for some Q&A. All right, I'm going to open it up. So let me go into the chat. So I'm here to answer any of your questions. Who would like to ask a question? Or just give some feedback about what's the biggest takeaway that you had from today? I'd love to hear that. What was your biggest takeaway today? Any questions? Let's see. Getting in the right pond. That's right. And you struggle with fishing in the right pond. That is what we love to help people figure out. And by the way, just so you'll know, when I talk to you about the affinity builder and the research, we are actually working on the research for our clients. It's not like we're just telling you what to do when you're off on your own. We're actually working either with you or for you. Stop trying to convince. Rush, I have to say, that was the biggest thing for me to learn. I didn't even realize that I was so in convincing mode. Okay, so a few more questions are coming in. I really didn't even know that I was in convincing mode. I thought I was right. Okay, so let me just see here. Let me make sure I'm not going to miss. Okay, Rick is asking, lots of tools can help nail down decision makers that hit the right target demographic, but how do you find decision makers that hit the right psychographics? Okay, that's a really good question. The psychographics actually has a lot to do with analyzing their type. So just from, we can find them when we get the right, when we learn where their type is, those types of people. So for example, if they are particular psychological types, we can find the right groups that they tend to hang out in or where they are actually being asked to speak. We can blend that, the demographics and the psychographics and their psychology. We can use strategies to find them. Definitely puts you in the right ballpark in a majority of the time. All right, podcasts. Yeah, that is really a great one. When you are looking to meet the right decision makers, they are podcast guests and alumni associations. That's very true. But when you find out who's a podcast guest, you can link with them on LinkedIn and start to get to know them. That was one of the main ways that I started to gain access to private equity operating partners through finding them on podcasts and then connecting with them. And they were willing to meet with me. And even though I had never had any experience in private equity before. How do you get invited to speak at conferences or podcasts? That's another great tool that we work with our clients on. So the way to do that is to gain access to relationships with association leaders and the program directors of those associations. This is really focused cold calling, isn't it? Rather than dumb dialing. You're finding prospects that might be buyers and getting to know them and presenting to their fashion, in their fashion. Correct. But I call it more, I don't really look at this as cold at all. In fact, I call it a very, very warm. This is really understanding people and developing a reason for them to want to get to know you as much as you wanting to get to know them. It's really using the psychology and the emotional intelligence of being a human being. This is really actually bringing us back to humanity versus cold anything. And I'm definitely not a fan of cold calling. I know people say that it works, but I think it's really important to do what feels right for you. And for me, cold calling doesn't feel right for me. Many thanks. Have to drop off. Great. Well, okay, let me put in the chat box for you guys who do want to reach out to me. Oh, by the way, one last thing I want to tell you before you depart. This is where you're going to actually book a discovery call with me. So take a little copy that link. And also for those of you who are on with me live today, send me an email, nancy@fractionals.ai, and I'm going to get you a copy of my book, Direct Access. I will actually be getting you a free copy of the book. And all you have to do is send me an email and tell me that you were, and I'm going to give you the code for when you check out, you're going to get a code and it's going to check you out for free. All right, any parting comments from you guys? Link for the call. Oh, here it is. I will be following up with you, by the way, so you will be getting, success. There you go, Steve. Oh, my notes aren't showing up here. Oh, that's interesting. Hang on a second. I'm sorry. Hang on a minute. Everyone, I didn't realize that. Here you go. Thank you for telling me. There you go. Now everybody should see that now. Thank you for telling me. I'm so glad that you found this helpful, Larry. Thank you for all of the recommendations of the people that you send my way. Thank you, everybody. My email address is, let's see, Which means- Everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really a pleasure being with you today. I hope you've gotten value out of it. Please send me, this is where you're going to actually be able to get your discount code. Just send me an email. And I really want to thank you so much for being live. I know you've taken time out of your busy schedule, and I'm very excited to actually speak with anybody who is ready to move your business to the next level and really uncover where it's been lagging, because there's so much opportunity to be had today, and it's time to actually take advantage of that. Especially, it's a very competitive market out there, and you deserve the right to have much more really qualified business. So thanks for being with me, everybody. Great to see you. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.